So I have already cut out my skirts on my fabric, but I'll go ahead and explain what I have done. So because my skirts will have a waistband of 2 inches, I placed the 2 inches on my tape measure right there at the waistline of the skirt, and from there I took my hip line to be 10.5. Well, my hip line is actually 10 inches. So the 1/2 inch is seam allowance to sew the waistband and the waistline of the skirt together. And then I took my skirt length to be 24.5. So the 1/2 inch is seam allowance to sew the waistband and the waistline together, but my actual skirt length is 24 inches. Then from my skirt length line, I have a hem allowance of 1.5 inches. On the front part of the skirt, I came down from the waistline by 1 inch. Now the front of the skirt does not have a dart allowance. Only the back has a dart allowance of 1 inch, which you can see right there. And then I have an extension of 1 inch, which will be for the zipper allowance at the back of the skirt. And now from here, I'll go ahead and mark half of my bust span measurement plus 1 inch for my zipper allowance. So I will notch that point, and that will become the position for the dart. So now I'm just going ahead to mark the dart placement for the 2 sides of the skirt. And the dart length is 5.5 inches from the waistline of the skirt. So after marking that for the first part of the back, I would also do the same thing for the second part of the back. Then I'll take this to my sewing machine, and from here I will sew by 1/2 inch and stop at this point right here. And I'll repeat the same thing on this other side, sew by 1/2 inch and stop here. So I have sewn the 2 darts on the back of the skirt, and I have also cut out my waistband. So this is the waistband for the back. Then I cut out the front waistband on a fold. Now the length of my waistband is 2 inches, but I made it 2.5 because 1/2 inch is seam allowance to sew the waistband to the waistline of the skirt. So now I'm going to take this to my sewing machine, and I'm going to sew the waistband by 1/2 inch to the waistline of the skirt. I'll repeat the same thing for this other one. Then for the front of the skirt, I would place the center of the waistband to the center of the skirt, and I'll go ahead and sew them together by 1/2 inch. So I have sewn the waistbands to the waistlines of the front and back of the skirt. Now I'm going to focus on the back of the skirt. So at the zipper allowance area on the wrong side of the 2 parts of the back, I would mark my hip line at that point, and after doing that, I will place them good side to good side together like this. Then from my hip line, I will go downwards by 2 inches. And after marking that, from here, I will begin to sew by 1 inch until I get to the hem of the skirt. So I have made the stitch, so I gave the stitch a good press so that it opens nicely. Now I will go ahead and sew my zipper to the zipper allowance at the back of the skirt by 1 inch. So I'm going to sew till I get to the waistband, and I'll repeat the same thing on the other side. I will sew by 1 inch till I get to the waistband, and when I'm done, I'm going to trim off and finish off the zipper at the waistband. So I have sewn the zipper to the back of the skirt, and this is how it opens up. Now I'm just going to place the good sides of the front and back of the skirt together like this. So I'll be sewing only the side seam of the skirt by 1 inch all the way down to the hem, but I will leave the side seam opened. So I have gone ahead to close up the side seam, but I left this other one opened. So I'm going to open up the skirt like this. From the hem of the skirt, I will begin to mark my hem allowance of 1.5 inches. So I'll mark that across the entire hem of the skirt. Now I will go ahead and fold the hem first by 1/2 inch. Then I'm going to fold it again by 1/2 inch. Then I'll take this to my sewing machine and make a top stitch across the hem all the way till I get to this area. So guys, I'm done sewing the hem of the skirt. Now the next step is to place the side seam of the skirt together like this. Then I will go upwards by 4 inches from the hem of the skirt and mark. I would mark that at the back of the skirt too. Then from the side seam here, I will come downwards by 2 inches, which is where the waistband stops. So I'll mark out that point like this. Then next thing I'm going to do is to create the style line for the asymmetric ruffle. So from here, I'm going to connect like this all the way to that point I marked where my waistband is. And then from that point, I'm going to connect all the way to the point where I marked 4 inches above the hem at the back of the skirt, like this. So this is the style line for the asymmetric ruffle. So now I'm going to take my tape measure and I'm going to measure the circumference of the area that I just marked. So after measuring, what I had was 56. So I'll multiply that by 2.5 and that will be 140. So this is the fabric for the ruffle. It is a doll face lilac satin fabric, and on a fold I have about 35 inches. Now my fabric is on 2 folds. That means I have about 4 layers of fabric. So I have 1, 2, 3 and 4. So multiplying 35 by 4, I have in total 140. So I have already sewn the hem of the fabric. So the length of the fabric is 10.5. So the 1/2 inch will be used to sew the ruffle to the body of the skirt. So to start creating the ruffle on the body of the skirt, I'm going to turn the fabric like this to the good side. Next thing I'm going to do is to mark 1.5 inches away from the side seam at that area of the skirt, and I'll mark the same thing at the other side of the skirt. Then from the edge of this fabric, I'm going to come inwards by 1 inch. I'll place this 1 inch extension right onto this point here, and I'll begin to gather my fabric like this along the line that I created for the asymmetric ruffle. So I'm going to gather the fabric like this all the way till I get to this point right here. And also at this point, I would create 1 inch extension at the edge of the fabric like this. I'm going to place it right onto this point. So from that point, that is where I'll begin to gather my fabric. And I will gather like this. And from here, I would sew by 1/2 inch all the way to this point right here. So I have sewn the ruffle onto the body of the skirt. So now I will bring the 2 side seam allowance together like this. So remember that 1 inch extension that I made while sewing the ruffle? I'm going to move it aside like this because I won't be sewing it together with the side seam. So I will do the same thing on the other side. I would move it away from the side seam allowance like this. Now I will bring the 2 side seam allowances of the skirt. I'll place them together like this. So I would move the ruffle away from the side seam. Now from the waistband of the skirt, I will begin to sew by 1 inch till I get to the hem of the skirt. So I have sewn the side of the skirt closed. Now remember that you're not supposed to sew the 1 inch extension together with the side seam. So to close that area, you're going to bring the 2 1 inch extensions together like this. Now go ahead and sew from here by 1 inch all the way to this point. So I have made my own stitch. So I'm going to turn the fabric back to the good side, and the skirt is ready, guys. It's as simple as A, B, C and D. So please don't forget to hit the like button and turn on post notification, and also please subscribe to the channel.